I'm Ethan Bailey, a 35-year-old electrical engineer living in Pinewood Estates, Seattle. And I never thought I'd be locking horns with a thief decked out in designer yoga pants. This neighborhood, with its neatly trimmed lawns, summer barbecues, and neighbors who mostly mind their own business, was my sanctuary after a quiet divorce. I live with my mom, Martha, a 68-year-old with sharp eyes and a memory that could recount every neighborhood scandal. My job designing power management systems for commercial buildings keeps me busy, and evenings are filled with online gaming sessions with friends. My bachelor life was simple until Deborah Harrington moved in next door, bringing her gleaming white Tesla Model X and an attitude that made the whole community hold its breath. Deborah swept in like a hurricane, her short blonde hair slicked back, red t-shirt clinging tight, and her potbelly jiggling with every pointed command. When we first met, I brought a welcome basket local craft beer and artisan chocolates out of the Midwestern manners my mom drilled into me. "How thoughtful," she said, her smile never reaching her eyes as she took the gift. She invited me in to see her suburban palace, freshly renovated, emphasizing every detail. "This kitchen island is imported Italian marble," or William, my husband, a corporate attorney, only wants the best. In 15 minutes, she mentioned his job 3 times. But when she asked about me, her gaze slid over me like I was a worthless trinket. "Your house. Quaint, isn't it?" she said, making quaint sound like a gas station bathroom. I should have seen the red flags. The previous owners of her house sold well below market value and bolted, citing a job opportunity. Now I know they were fleeing Deborah before she turned their backyard into an infinity pool. Within 6 weeks of moving in, she'd clawed her way to HOA vice president, ousting Dorothy, a retired principal, by threatening to expose her son's old DUI. My mom, Martha, shook her head as she told me. She's bought the board with fancy wine parties and intimidated anyone who stood in her way. I had no interest in HOA politics, just wanted to pay my dues and live in peace. But then, that month's electric bill hit like a punch to the gut. $450, triple my usual $150. I called the power company, checked every appliance in the house, even used a power meter to scan for issues, but found nothing. The neighbors on the other side, the Andersons, said their bill was fine, meaning the problem was unique to my property. The mystery lingered until one night when my security camera pinged at 2 a.m. I rubbed my eyes, opened my phone, and nearly fell out of bed. There was Deborah, in a silk robe and designer pajamas, sneaking across my backyard with a long extension cord. She plugged it into my outdoor outlet, the one I use for yard work, and hid the cord along our fence. Tucked under shrubs, she'd pushed the HOA to plant for neighborhood aesthetics. The other end connected to her Tesla, parked right at the fence, its charging port perfectly aligned. I watched the footage over and over, stunned. She checked the connection, glanced around like a thief, and scurried back to her house like an electricity-stealing gremlin. The next morning, I knocked on her door, phone in hand with the video queued up. Deborah answered, dressed in pricey tennis gear, flashing a bright smile. "Deborah, we need to talk about you using my electricity to charge your Tesla," I said bluntly. Her smile didn't waver. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Ethan," she said with a dismissive laugh. I showed her the crystal clear video. Her face hardened, but she doubled down. "Could be anyone. Besides, if your electrical system's so shoddy it's racking up high bills, you should upgrade. Maintaining property values is everyone's duty, you know." Before slamming the door, she added, her voice sweet as poison, "As HOA vice president, I'd be happy to discuss your overgrown hedges." I walked back home, blood boiling. 6 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, designing power grids and security infrastructure, taught me the most dangerous enemies are the shameless ones. Deborah wasn't just stealing electricity, she was using her HOA clout to keep me quiet. I checked the camera logs. She charged her Tesla every night, siphoning 75 kilowatt hours, costing me $300 a month. I installed a lockbox on the outdoor outlet, but 48 hours later, an HOA violation notice arrived. Unapproved lockboxes must be removed immediately. It was signed by Gregory Palmer, the HOA inspector, but I knew Deborah's hand was behind it. Gregory, a former middle manager, now wielded his clipboard like a knight, bought off by Deborah's expensive scotch and flattery. I decided to attend the monthly HOA meeting, my first since moving in. In the clubhouse, Deborah sat at the board table, her eyes icy. When I raised my hand to address the electricity theft, she cut me off, her voice smooth. Personal disputes must be submitted in writing first. The president, Frank, a balding man who always looked confused, nodded along. Then she dropped her bombshell. A proposal for 4 EV charging stations in the common areas. Costs split through HOA dues. One station would sit right between her house and mine. I realized Deborah didn't just want me to pay for her Tesla charging. She wanted the whole neighborhood to foot the bill. That night, Mom sipped her coffee and said, "Ethan, she thinks she's queen. But even queens fall if you know how to set the trap." I grinned. With my engineering know-how and military experience, I'd show Deborah that electricity doesn't just light up. It can burn her ambitions to the ground. After the HOA meeting, I trudged home feeling like I'd just walked off a battlefield without bullets. Deborah Harrington, in her tight red t-shirt, her potbelly jiggling as she rambled about Pinewood Estates' green future, had turned the neighborhood into a free power source for her $9,000 Tesla. Her proposal for EV charging stations, costs split through HOA dues, was a slick move to legitimize her theft. I knew if I didn't act, my $450 monthly electric bill was just the start. 6 years in the Army Corps of Engineers taught me to take down an enemy. You've got to know them better than they know themselves. The next morning, I sat with my mom, Martha, at the kitchen table. She sipped her coffee, her eyes sharp as knives. "Ethan, she's not just stealing electricity. She wants to own this neighborhood," she said, handing me a stack of handwritten notes. Mom, with her detective-like observation skills, had chronicled Deborah's every move, from lavish wine parties to bribe the HOA board, to forcing Dorothy out with a vicious rumor about her son's DUI. "She's a spider," Mom said. "Weaves her web before she bites." I nodded, resolved. Deborah's web would become her trap. I started by gathering evidence. Security cameras caught Deborah charging her Tesla every night, siphoning 75 kilowatt hours, adding $300 to my bill. I installed wide-angle cameras and a new lock on the outdoor outlet. But 2 days later, an HOA violation notice arrived. Unapproved lockboxes must be removed immediately. Gregory Palmer, the HOA inspector, stood at my door, clipboard in hand, chest puffed out like a knight. "This is a personal matter between you and Ms. Harrington," he said when I showed him the video of Deborah's theft. "The HOA doesn't get involved, but the lockbox has to go." I caught a whiff of expensive cologne on him, a gift from Deborah, I'd bet. That evening, I met Brian and Sarah Thompson, a couple from down the street. Brian, a high school teacher, and Sarah, a nurse, were struggling with rising HOA fees. We had to pull Tommy from baseball because we couldn't afford it. Sarah sighed. When I showed them Deborah's video, Brian fumed. "She's making the whole neighborhood pay for her car." They agreed to help me collect signatures from residents opposing charging stations without individual meters. Mom introduced me to Mrs. Wilson, a 68-year-old widow who knew every secret in Pinewood Estates. "Harrington buys the board like candy," Wilson said, handing me records of suspicious HOA fee hikes. "But she didn't count on someone like you." I dug into local laws and HOA regulations, learning that while the board controlled property appearances, they couldn't touch utilities or safety measures. My military experience kicked in. Intelligence is a weapon stronger than brute force. I installed a power monitoring device on my electrical panel, logging exactly how much electricity Deborah used. The data showed she charged from 1 to 4 a.m., pulling maximum power, a habit that could damage both her car and the grid. I shared the data with Brian, Sarah, and Wilson, building a small but steadfast alliance. Deborah didn't sit idle. A week later, I got another violation notice. My fence was 2 inches over regulation height. When I measured, it was perfectly compliant. Gregory showed up, his new watch glinting another Deborah perk. No doubt. Fix it, Bailey, he said. His tone smug, I complied. But my blood boiled. Mom, watching from the window, whispered. She's boxing you in. But a corner's the best place for a trap. I decided to confront Deborah one last time. I knocked on her door, armed with a folder, videos, photos, and cost calculations. William, her husband, answered, dressed in a pricey suit despite it being Saturday. He skimmed the folder. Bored. It's just a few bucks of electricity. Not worth the fuss, he said, ignoring the $300 monthly tally. Sorted out like adults. The door slammed in my face. That night, Deborah stormed across our lawns, designer sunglasses perched in her hair. You dared go to William, she hissed, keeping her voice low to avoid neighbors' ears. William's a top attorney in this state. One word from him, and your remote job's gone. She spun away, leaving her threat hanging. The pressure mounted. Neighbors who'd been friendly started avoiding me. Brian called, hesitant. There's a rumor you've been unstable since your military days, obsessed with stalking Deborah. I was floored. Deborah had twisted my security cameras against me, spreading lies that I installed them to watch her, not catch her stealing. My alliance wobbled only Brian, Sarah, and Mom stood firm. She plays dirty, Mom said, eyes gleaming. But you're an engineer. Show her. Electricity can bite. I began designing a smart power protection system, SPS, a trick I'd learned in the military. The SPS would detect unauthorized power use, issue visual and audible warnings, and, if ignored, create a small voltage fluctuation before cutting power completely. I turned my garage into a workshop, assembling industrial components, voltage monitors, current sensors, and a backup battery for outages. Everything had to meet National Electrical Code standards. I double-checked and consulted a city inspector friend. The system wouldn't harm anyone using it properly, but those who ignored warnings would reap their own consequences. I grinned, thinking of an old military saying, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. When I installed the SPS in my backyard, I posted a clear warning sign. Protected power system. Authorized use only. Improper use may damage equipment. The sign glowed with LED lights at night. No one could claim they didn't see it. Deborah would soon learn that stealing electricity from an engineer isn't a game she could win. I stood in my garage, fluorescent light glinting off the freshly completed Smart Power Protection System SPS. Industrial components, voltage monitors, current sensors. A backup battery sat snug in a waterproof enclosure, ready to take on Deborah Harrington. She, with her tight red t-shirt, potbelly jiggling with every pointed gesture, had turned Pinewood Estates into her personal playground, forcing me to pay $300 a month to charge her Tesla. But 6 years in the Army Corps of Engineers taught me, a good trap doesn't just catch the rat, it makes the rat leap right in. The SPS, with its LED warnings and audible alerts, was my trap. Deborah would soon learn, electricity doesn't just flow, it bites. That week, Deborah escalated the war. Security cameras caught her glaring at the SPS warning sign, eyes narrowed, like she was plotting. Then an HOA violation notice arrived. Unauthorized signage. Remove immediately. I smirked. The sign was a mandated safety requirement under county code. Untouchable. By Gregory Palmer. I submitted paperwork citing the electrical code. And for once, he stayed quiet. But Deborah didn't stop. She convinced the HOA board to approve an emergency electrical upgrade for the common area, installing high-capacity outlets right at the fence line between her house and mine. That night, cameras spotted her in a silk robe, plugging her Tesla into the new outlet, giving a taunting wave toward my camera before strutting back. The SPS logged the data. She pulled maximum power from 1 to 4 siphoning 75 kilowatt hours nightly, adding $500 a month to the collective HOA bill. She wasn't just stealing my electricity anymore. She was making the whole neighborhood pay for her $9,000 car. I expanded the SPS to monitor the common area outlets, not to control them since they weren't my property, but to track usage. The data confirmed Deborah was the sole nighttime user. I shared it with Brian and Sarah Thompson. who were struggling with rising HOA fees. She thinks we're her ATM, Brian growled, clutching his latest bill. My mom, Martha, called a small meeting at our house. Only Brian, Sarah, and Mrs. Wilson showed up. Others had backed off, spooked by Deborah's rumor that I was unstable from my military days. Mom, her eyes sharp as steel, slammed a stack of documents on the table, records of shady HOA decisions, from fee hikes to upgrades benefiting Deborah. She's got Gregory eating out of her hand with scotch and watches, Mom said. Frank, the president, just wants to retire to Florida, so he lets her run the show. Wilson added, I heard she's pushing for an official Tesla supercharger station, $25,000, billed to all of us as a special assessment. I clenched my fists. Deborah didn't just want to win. She wanted to crush me. I decided to play it quiet. The SPS was ready, but I needed stronger evidence for the upcoming HOA meeting. I programmed the SPS to log every detail of electrical activity, from usage hours to power patterns. The data showed Deborah always charged at maximum power instantly, bypassing the Tesla's safe ramp-up mode, a habit that could fry her car's battery. I set the SPS to issue 3 warnings, flashing yellow lights, low beeps, then a minor voltage fluctuation, before cutting power. If she ignored them, the system would protect itself. But everything was safety compliant, leaving no legal gaps. I photographed the setup, saved records, and double-checked the National Electrical Code. Do it right. Do it tight, I told myself, echoing my old commander. Meanwhile, Deborah kept up her games. I got a flurry of petty violations. Trash cans left out 15 minutes too long. My garage door needing repainting despite a fresh coat last year. Each time, Gregory showed up, his tone smug. I complied but documented everything, from notices to his self-satisfied smirks. Brian and Sarah shared my data with trusted neighbors, and slowly, a network of fed-up residents formed. We can't let her keep running this place, Sarah said, her eyes blazing. Wilson, with her gossip web, reported Deborah was lobbying the board to delay the HOA meeting to solidify her grip. The night before the scheduled meeting, Mom called me to the porch. Moonlight bathed Pinewood Estates, a place once peaceful, now a battleground. Ethan, you remember your dad? She asked, voice soft. Dad, an electrician, taught me everything about circuits before he passed. He'd be proud you're not backing down. I hugged her, my chest warm. This fight wasn't just about bills. It was about protecting our home, where Mom and I rebuilt our lives after so much loss. The next morning, I got a shock. The HOA meeting was postponed, citing technical issues with the projector. Wilson texted, saw Deborah's car at Frank's last night. She's up to something. I looked at the SPS, its LED lights blinking, ready to go. Deborah thought she controlled everything, but she forgot a basic law of physics. Electricity always finds a path. I opened my laptop, prepping documents for a special HOA meeting I'd request. Videos, data, signatures from 23 households. I had it all. Deborah could bribe the board, but she couldn't buy the truth. As I ran a final SPS check, I saw Deborah sneaking to the common area outlet, plugging in at 1A. The warning lights flashed. The beeps sounded, but she just smirked, cranking up the charge like she was daring the system. I grinned. The SPS logged it all. Every time she pulled power, she pulled herself closer to the trap I'd set, with Mom, Brian, Sarah, and Wilson by my side. I was ready for the HOA showdown. Electricity wasn't just energy. It was justice. And Deborah was about to get a shock. Late at night, moonlight bathed Pinewood Estates, but I wasn't sleeping. The computer screen in my garage glowed with data from the Smart Power Protection System SPS. Deborah Harrington, in a silk robe, plugged her Tesla into the common area outlet at 1A. Anna. Me. The SPS warning lights flashed yellow. Beeps sounded. But she, with her short blonde hair glinting and potbelly jiggling under a red t-shirt, just smirked, cranking up the charge like she was daring it. I shook my head. 6 years in the Army Corps of Engineers taught me, those who defy physics reap their own consequences. The SPS, with its 3-stage warnings, was ready to teach her a lesson. The system worked as programmed. After 3 warning cycles, lights, beeps, a small voltage fluctuation, the SPS detected a dangerous surge and cut power completely. The logs showed Deborah not only ignored the warnings, but ramped up the charge, triggering the protection mode. The next morning, furious pounding shook my front door. Through the peephole, I saw Deborah, still in pajamas, face flushed with rage. "Open this door, you petty little man," she yelled, loud enough for the neighborhood to hear. I opened it calmly, coffee mug in hand. "Good morning, Deborah." "Something wrong?" She jabbed a finger at my chest. "You destroyed my car. My Tesla's bricked. The system says it's a power surge. You did this." Neighbors started peeking out from their driveways. Curious. I kept my tone even. I installed a standard power protection system to prevent unauthorized use, with clear warnings. "Did your car have an issue while charging at 100? Me. Her face paled as she noticed the crowd. "You sabotaged it," she hissed. "Quieter now." "The battery's fried. $22,000 to fix." Williams calling our lawyer. I handed her the SPS documentation, technical specs, safety certifications. "Here's the system. It warns before cutting power. I have video of you ignoring the flashing lights and increasing the charge, causing the error." I pointed to my security camera. "It's all recorded." William pulled up 20 minutes later in his Mercedes, phone glued to his ear. He frowned, clearly annoyed. "Ethan, Deborah says you wrecked our Tesla with a homemade electrical trap," he said. I gave him the SPS paperwork. Unlike his wife, he read it carefully, his face darkening at the warning section. "Did you see any warning lights?" he asked Deborah. She stammered about meaningless lights. When I offered to show the video, he raised a hand. "Not yet." I laid my cards on the table. "William, your wife's been stealing electricity from me, then the community, for months. I have videos, data, and resident testimonies. I tried resolving this directly multiple times. Misusing HOA funds for personal gain could be considered fraud, especially by someone in a leadership role." William stiffened, glancing at Deborah, whose confidence had crumbled. "We'll talk at home," he said, his voice icy as they left. He muttered, $22,000. "What did you do with HOA funds?" That afternoon, a flatbed tow truck hauled Deborah's broken Tesla to a service center. The preliminary report confirmed battery damage, $22,000 to repair, not covered by warranty due to improper charging and ignoring warnings. Deborah glared at me, eyes blazing, but I just smiled. "We should meet at the special HOA meeting I've requested." The meeting took place a week later at the community clubhouse, packed like never before. Nearly 50 households crammed in, chairs full, people lining the walls. I arrived early, laptop and documents in hand. My mom, Martha, was already there, organizing a stack of HOA financial records like a general, light reading. She winked, sliding me a copy. It listed every shady decision Deborah pushed, annotated with bylaw violations. Frank, the HOA president, trembled as he called the meeting to order, sweat beading as he saw Mom handing out papers. Deborah sat in the front row, dressed in an outfit worth most people's mortgage payments, her face stone cold, but lacking its usual arrogance. William was absent, off calling Tokyo again. I stepped up, hooking my laptop to the projector. Brian and Sarah Thompson flashed encouraging thumbs up, their kids beside them with coloring books. I began, voice calm but sharp. For 6 months, the Harrington household has used 75 kilowatt hours of community electricity nightly, adding $500 a month to our HOA fees. I displayed a graph showing fee hikes, aligning perfectly with Deborah's charging. Emergency electrical upgrades were pushed through without a vote, designed to benefit her. I explained the SPS. It's standard industrial tech with clear warnings. When unauthorized use is detected, it protects by cutting power. The final video was the knockout. Deborah ignoring the warning lights, cranking up the charge, frying her battery. Deborah leapt up, face red. "This is slander. He's been harassing me with cameras," but her usual authority had evaporated. Brian stood. My family pulled our son from baseball because of rising HOA fees. We've been paying for your car. Other residents chimed in. Retirees on fixed incomes. Young families scraping by. Gregory, the HOA inspector, stared at his clipboard. Shamefaced. My mom rose, her voice ringing. I move for an immediate vote. Deborah repays all misappropriated funds, is removed from the board, and we hold new elections. A dozen voices seconded at once. The vote was a landslide. Deborah had to repay $7,000 in electricity costs, was ousted from the board, and a new election was set. Brian was nominated for president on a platform of transparency. As she left the room, Deborah shot me a venomous look, but I just shrugged. Electricity doesn't lie, and she'd wired herself into my trap. That night, Mom and I sat on the porch. You made your dad proud, she said, eyes twinkling. Justice wasn't just toppling Deborah. It was giving Pinewood Estates back to its people. If you've faced a Deborah, share your story and spread the unbreakable spirit. 3 months after the fateful HOA meeting, Pinewood Estates felt reborn. Deborah Harrington, once a storm in a tight red t-shirt, her potbelly jiggling with every barked order, was now a fading memory. After her humiliating defeat, she and William hastily listed their suburban palace below market value, fleeing to a gated community in another state, likely one with better protected outlets. The day they left, no one waved goodbye. Only my mom, Martha, sat across the street in her lawn chair, knitting and raising her teacup in a mock toast whenever Deborah glared over. Karma doesn't need Wi-Fi to find you. Mom winked. I stood on our porch, watching the sunset gild the manicured lawns. Pinewood Estates was no longer a battleground. The new HOA board, led by Brian Thompson, brought transparency. They installed EV charging stations with individual meters, so everyone paid their fair share. I helped design the system modern, equitable, and impossible to exploit. 3 residents bought electric cars, charging with peace of mind. No skyrocketing bills. You're a quiet hero, Sarah Thompson said, dropping off a plate of thank you cookies. I shrugged. Not a hero, but an engineer who knows how to set a trap. Sure. Gregory Palmer, the HOA inspector, resigned for health reasons. Though everyone knew he was ashamed of being Deborah's puppet, he apologized to a few residents for unfair violations, now living so quietly that newcomers don't even know his name. Frank, the former president, fast-tracked his retirement, moving to Florida 3 months early. As if shedding a weight, the community transformed. Sarah launched a real neighborhood watch, not for nitpicking fences but for safety. Mom started a community garden, turning a vacant lot into a hub where residents grew vegetables and flowers, bonding over shared soil. Deborah's house sold to a young couple, a doctor and a coder, kind and respectful neighbors. They asked permission before installing a small fountain, and the new board happily approved. Every time I passed the charging station, once, the turf of Deborah's Tesla, I can't help but smile. She could have had it all if she'd played fair. Instead, her arrogance cost her $22,000 in car repairs, $7,000 in repayments, and a loss on their rushed home sale. Justice, like electricity, always finds a path. I turned down nominations for the HOA board, despite nudging from neighbors. Long meetings aren't my style. Instead, I volunteer as a technical advisor, maintaining the charging stations and security systems. That suits me, contributing without arguing over paint colors. Tommy, the Thompson's son, led his baseball team to a regional championship that summer, showing off his medal to me with a grin. Thanks for chasing off the witch, Mr. Ethan. I laughed. Kids always tell it straight. Tonight, Mom and I sit on the porch, moonlight draping the quiet neighborhood. You think of your dad, she asks, voice soft. Dad, who taught me everything about circuits, is surely smiling somewhere. I think he'd be proud, I say, hugging her. Beating Deborah wasn't just winning a fight. It was building a community where neighbors talk, help each other, and stand up together. Pinewood Estates isn't perfect, but we learned that confronting a bully, at any age, works. If you've faced a Deborah, share your story. The current of justice is always ready to shine. Thank you all for watching my electric showdown with Deborah Harrington in Pinewood Estates. If you enjoyed how the current taught her a lesson, drop a like on this video. Each like is a spark spreading the unbreakable spirit, letting every Deborah out there know justice always finds a way. Don't forget to share your own stories of similar battles in the comments below.